Thank you, Peggy.
What?
Is the microphone on?
Yeah.
There we go. So we're going to sit for a few minutes and then take refuge again if you want to get your refuge prayer out. It's the loose coffee, okay? So we can set a motivation based on the 4 thoughts that turn the mind. Doing our best in this moment to recognize the genuine preciousness of this moment. There are many, many factors that lead to that, but a few of them are that we're able-bodied enough to be here, and our 5 faculties are clear enough that we can engage study and thinking. Many beings don't have even that condition physically. We have enough leisure time to be able to choose to come here and study the Dharma. The Dharma is here because of so many beings, including our incredibly kind teachers who have brought it to us. We have a mind that's interested in the Dharma. So many people aren't interested, and even they read it or see it. The karmic mind stream isn't receptive. We live in a country where there's freedom of religion. We can pursue this without hiding it or worrying that someone's going to burn our building. In many countries that would happen if we practice this openly there. So we have huge amounts of many causes and conditions that are so conducive to using our life in a meaningful way. And yet, at any moment, we could lose our life. Our death is 100% certain. And the time of death is 100% uncertain. So it's very important to see that's part of what makes the life precious. We don't know in our next life what the conditions will be. We don't know what will arise from our past mind stream. We do know if we continue to practice, the fruits of that practice will not be lost, but we don't know when it will arise again, when the causes and conditions will come together such that it will arise the way it has in this life. So best not to waste time. We also know from our own experience that our thoughts, words, and actions have consequences. There's simply no way to escape that. We can hide, try to hide our thoughts, words, and actions, but they still have consequences. And that consideration of karma leads us to practice good ethics, non-harming, helping, benefiting others. And then no matter where we look in with the samsaric mind, a mind stream affected by ignorance at the base, craving and attachment due to that ignorance, we see there's not a single thing that's truly peaceful, that leads to true happiness. Not one single thing. We can spend our lives trying and trying and trying on the worldly level to find that lasting happiness, but it's not there to be found. So based on those four thoughts, we can consider where true happiness abides on a relative level. How do we experience it? In general, when we think of others, help others, cherish others, love others, see the deep kindness of others, we feel more peaceful. When we try to simply make our own selves happy at the expense of others, we feel very disturbed, very upset. So then we commit ourselves to these kinds of practices like the 8 verses of mind training. So we can achieve that peace, become that peace, and in that way offer it to others simply by our presence. So make that motivation deep in your heart, in your own words, and make it vast, including friends, family, enemies, strangers, beings who aren't human, vast and deep. Okay. Now we have an enemy in the room, and it's called the post-lunch slump. PLS. So you must be aware of it, and you must take care of your own version. I'll try to take care of mine with some black tea. I thought it's probably good we do our refuge prayer again. So true. And at some point in practice, they say at least 3 times in the morning and at least 3 times at night, take refuge. And really all during the day, especially when we mess up, or we say, I messed up. Quite good to just say, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha in this moment. I feel like it's kind of turning into kind of going to your mommy. Says, I screwed up. And she says, oh, I love you. And you just get like a reboot. So refuge can be the reboot. Okay, let's do this prayer. Until I awaken,
I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the goodness of generosity and other virtues, may I awaken fully in order to help all beings. Until I awaken, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the goodness of generosity and other virtues, may I awaken fully in order to help all beings. Until I awaken, I take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. Through the goodness of generosity and other virtues, may I awaken fully in order to help all beings. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be apart from the sacred happiness which is free of suffering. May they dwell in the great equanimity, impartial, free of attachment and aversion. While the nature of beings has always been full enlightenment, not realizing this, they wander in endless samsara. For the boundless suffering of sentient beings, may overwhelming compassion be born in my being. While such compassion is active and immediate, in the moment of compassion, its essential emptiness is nakedly clear. This conjunction is the undeviating supreme path. Inseparable from it, may I meditate day and night. The spirit of awakening is precious. May it arise in whom it has not arisen. Once arisen, may it not diminish, but ever increase and flourish.
Okay. So I thought what we could do now is the third go-round. The first one was just when we recited it together, no comment. Second one, we recited and just you quietly contemplated it. And have a third go-around with each verse. With a, I'm going to suggest a contemplation. So again, we'll have people will take turns reading the verse, and then I'm going to suggest a sentence or two for contemplation. If it grabs you and it's helpful, use that. If it's not, just do what we did the last time. So are the instructions clear? Okay. So let's go back to the first version. Is it the first one? No, I called it my first one, but it's the last one in the last page of the packet. That's my first version. Okay? I'm a Zopa Rinpoche's. And one thing that we won't have much time to do today, I don't think, although it could happen the last bit of time, is taking one of these and looking at the two versions and seeing the different emphasis. They're quite different in some parts. And in a way to do that, to illustrate the difficulties of English translation of Tibetan verses, which I don't know if they came from Sanskrit or Pali or something. I don't think so, because they're Mahayana, so probably came out of, well, I don't know.
Probably all three.
Yeah, maybe. We don't, but just that, you go, the translators are going to do their best, and you're going to find many versions with many of our texts that way. So, so let's start. Who would like to, and let's have new readers, if you think we can find them, who would like to read the first verse. Then I'll give a sentence that's a suggested contemplation, and then we'll have a couple minutes on each verse, okay? Who would like to read verse 1? Corey.
With the thought of attaining awakening for the welfare of all beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I will constantly practice holding them dear.
Thank you. Okay, so meditation time, contemplation time. How can a sentient being be more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, given that a wish-fulfilling jewel can grant any wish in the world? Simply sit with that. So behind this curtain, we have a sentient being. Here we have a wish-fulfilling jewel. Which one is the most precious and why? It's fine if you're going, I don't know. The sentient being, I know. I'm not wish-fulfilling jewels. They never do what I want. So who'd like to share any thoughts? Even confusion. Matthew, I'm going to have you wait just a minute.
Okay.
Just to see if somebody else is not quite as quick as you. Stan.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised by this because.
Can you speak up?
Yeah, I was kind of surprised because I thought clearly the wish-fulfilling jewel is going to give me anything a sentient being could give me, even if a sentient being could give me enlightenment, because they're so annoying that I'm forced to actually open my heart and realize that they're suffering and have that depth of connection with them. And then I realized, oh, but with the wish-fulfilling jewel, if it was going to give me that, it would then have to show me a sentient being in order for me to have that response. So the wish-fulfilling jewel is less direct than this sentient being.
Yeah, oh, that's tricky, Stan. Because then you might still pick the wish-fulfilling jewel and wish for a sentient being. And particularly a pesky sentient being,
I
right?
don't need to wish for them.
Yeah, yeah. Good. But you got it. You got it in your roundabout way. Yeah, Miriam.
I developed a similar hierarchical arrangement where A is enlightenment, B are the sentient beings who can achieve enlightenment, and C is the wish-fulfilling jewel, and each are subservient one to the other.
Oh.
Therefore, C is subservient to enlightenment, so therefore I'm supposed to ask for the sentient being, even though I know I really like that wish-fulfilling jewel. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Darn it.
Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah. Any other comments? And it doesn't have to be you got an answer, but just what was the struggle is almost more revealing.
The sentient being, because then it's connections between the wish-fulfilling jewel seemed like a benevolent robot, and a sentient being connects with themselves and with others, and forms connections. And if we only have consciousness, that's all there is the connections of. Even though the idea of connecting one thing to another eventually supposedly dissolves, it's still connections. Is the
Yeah,
ultimate.
you know what I like about that thing you said is the wish-fulfilling jewel is inanimate. And also, well, mostly, I mean, it's going to function, supposedly. What are they? They don't seem to be in the world. The Karmapa said piles of money. Piles, endless money is the way to think about it. You had access to endless money, because he said, you know, these things come out of Tibetan cultural references, wish-fulfilling jewels. They're in the bottom of a deep ocean, and they're guarded by these creatures called the Naga kings, and who have a certain kind of wisdom, and they're very hard to get, and they're going to make you go through a lot before you get them. He said, well, that's not going to work for Westerners. Just say endless money. Now you say endless money, that's pretty like, I'm getting with Miriam, maybe want to move that up, that third thing. But yeah, it's not only kind of inanimate, but you're going to be the one wishing, and so all your limits are going to be there. The limited, the unenlightened is going to make the wishes, and that's kind of how we do our lives. That's what we're already doing. I'm leading myself, and I'm not an enlightened being. So I have to end up where I'm going toward, right? So, Matthew, you had something right off.
I actually think that I forgot your name, sir.
Stan.
Stan pretty much nailed it. Is, you know, what is possible for sentient beings that isn't possible for a wish-fulfilling jewel, and I didn't really get any further than that.
Yeah. You know, how many got raised? I'll ask this, you don't have to answer. I like these kind of personal things, but some people hate them. How many got raised with some sense of Christian religion? Okay, look around. Yeah. How many did not get raised with that, but you were influenced by it by reacting to it, or Yeah. So even you weren't raised in it, like we're atheists, but you got to be atheist in relationship to, or we're Jewish in relationship to.
No, Christianity is a relationship to Judaism, just letting you know.
Yeah. Thank you. A historian amongst us. what came first? So why was I saying that in relationship to a wish-fulfilling jewel? Oh yeah. Okay, back to Christians. Back to Christians. So there's this story of Jesus being taken to the mountaintop, and the devil's taking him up there. The devil, Lucifer, not called the devil in some, the archangel Lucifer, who disagreed with Jesus or God, and then had to go to hell or something. I don't totally remember it all, but the Lucifer and Jesus are up there, and Lucifer's trying to get Jesus on his team, the team of desire and aversion, and taking the victory for yourself. And he says to Jesus, he shows him a vision of the entire universe. This is all yours, and all you have to do is be on my team. And Jesus said, so that's like, I offer you the wish-fulfilling jewel. And I think the line in the Bible is something like this, like, even if I had all that, but I lose my, and in Christian they're going to say soul. You could say lose your sense of consciousness, you lose your awareness. Not worth it. Again, it's the trade-off. Everything in the world, you can have everything in the world, but all you got to trade is everything. Okay? Enlightenment, basically. That's what you'd lose. Okay, makes sense? Whether you believe it or not, it's kind of making sense. So it's all tangled up with the worldly concerns at that point. You know, I keep pursuing my comfort, my joy, my good reputation, and I keep trading off my practice. Yeah, you're in.
Actually, when you had said that the Karmapa said that we should think of it as endless supply of money, that immediately turned me off to it. For some reason, the idea of money it's just like, oh, you know, that made me think, oh, that, yeah, well, I can turn that away.
Yeah.
Oddly enough.
Yeah, and that's going to be different for different ones
Right.
of us. Yeah.
Somebody has different cultural feelings to different
somebody is going to be like, well, I don't know. Maybe I could buy a llama and have them go around with me and just teach me, you know, like that. Okay, probably enough of that.
So the wish-fulfilling jewel doesn't help us reach enlightenment fastest?
I think the idea
Are
is
you
how.
asking?
Well, I guess it depends on what your wish was, right?
Well, the trick is that the wish-fulfilling jewel can only give you what's in the world.
It can only give you what you want.
Yeah.
Oh, you have to want it.
So you have to want it, and that
Know what you
plunges you into the world of desire. So your wants will always be suffering.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Because again, who's the one making the wish? The limited, unenlightened, suffering mind.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Whereas a sentient being can, you know, slap you upside the head and wake you up fast to your anger, and therefore to your patience, and therefore on the road. Yeah. Thanks for asking that, though, because that's an important piece on it.
So is that, so wish-fulfilling jewel can't give you enlightenment?
No. It can only give you
Wishes, just
wishes,
so
and
you're stuck
only
with how far you can go with your wanting.
Okay.
you're
and
stuck in the
that
desire
dynamic.
realm.
Okay, so even Chenrezi's wish-fulfilling jewel that he's holding?
Well,
He
it
does
is
he does
different.
whatever he can for sentient beings.
But you're the one looking at it and making the wishes. He's
Ah,
wishing for your enlightenment.
The
What are you
the
wishing
other
for?
translation actually
Yeah.
directly
Tell me.
goes right at this. Second one says, with the wish to achieve the highest aim, enlightenment, which surpasses even a wish-fulfilling joy.
Oh, okay.
Dang it.
So now here's a place where Bill and I were looking at these, and you see the emphasis is one of them, it's on the preciousness of the wish-fulfilling jewel, and the other one's on the preciousness of enlightenment. So you can play with these verses, and you can see, and they're both quite useful. They're not. It's not like one's not useful. Yeah, Laura.
My little thought train was that the wish fulfilling jewel is something outside of me. So it was never going to be able to bring the causes for me to recognize my own full potential, that I don't need the wish fulfilling jewel. I don't, so enlightenment is something that couldn't come from some outside thing, and so, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of another way of saying what Bill and I were pointing at. You're still stuck with doing work internally,
Yeah.
or stuck, I don't know. You still have to do the work internally. Even the sentient being doesn't bring you the enlightenment.
Right.
They
Right.
do whatever they do.
Right.
They pass whatever laws they do, or act out, or praise you, or, love you or hate you. But all the work's in here. What am I doing in relation to that?
And the full potential is in here.
Yeah, right. And that's the only thing that's going to help you be aware of your reaction. The work is all inside. It's an inside job.
The framework of having one's wishes fulfilled is a framework of dependence. It's dependence upon conditions. So whether we say all the money or all the resources or all the control or whatever it is, it's still all modeled around dependence on a condition that will bring fulfillment.
A condition that what?
That will bring fulfillment. It's the condition. So it's dependence.
As though the condition could
Yeah.
bring fulfillment, but I would say that won't bring fulfillment.
Well, that's why it says
Yeah, a condition that won't.
surpasses even
Yeah.
wish-fulfilling.
Yeah. This is where we try and, one teacher always said, stop trying to line your ducks up in a row. You all run around in samsara, lining your little ducks up, and then they scatter, and you spend all your time lining them up again, and they scatter, and you spend all your time lining them up, and we're laughing because we recognize that, I'll get the new car, I'll get the new job, I'll get the new boyfriend, I'll get the new girlfriend, everything will be in order. Not. Yeah. Why? Because the mind that's doing that's totally caught in attraction, aversion, and basic ignorance, thinking there's a very important I here that must be satisfied. Okay, enough of that. Let's go on to number
No,
two.
I have to.
Oh,
the
we
Chenrezig.
We can't move yet.
I know. The Chenrezig.
I think it's good we
That's
can.
that's considered bodhicitta. That's the true wish-fulfilling jewel.
Oh, so there's more than one variation on the idea of a wish-fulfilling jewel.
Well, it's not so much. It's a different context from the point of view of
Oh, yeah.
the bodhisattva.
Yeah.
Then
Oh,
that's
so
actually what is.
Who's
what
looking
is-
at the jewel?
Yeah.
Well, it's actually the nature of it itself.
Yeah.
Like his isn't. I'm pointing at Chenrezig back here. You're going to look at that jewel and say, "I wish I had $1 million," and Chenrezig's just like,
Bodhicitta, baby.
and saying bodhicitta baby is much better than $1 million. That would just get you in a lot of trouble.
It's like
So they're not even the same jewel. But the wish-fulfilling jewel they're talking about here is this mythical thing that gives humans everything they want. It's just a straw man kind of set up.
genie in the
to-
lamp kind of thing.
Yeah, it's set up to knock it down. That's cool. I love that discussion. Okay, so verse number 2. You want to read that, Patty?
Whenever I'm with others, I will practice seeing myself as the lowest of all, and from the very depths of my heart, I will respectfully hold others as supreme.
Okay, so here's a couple of thoughts to play with. What's the purpose of this verse? And here's one. What kind of confidence would you need to have to be able to do this? Confidence in what? And if those aren't good enough, what self would be held as the lowest? So I'll read the three questions again. What's the purpose of this verse? What kind of confidence would you need to be able to do this? What self would be held as the lowest? Any thoughts, confusions, clarifications? Emily, then Heather.
Yeah, I've been struggling with this one. And we kind of talked about this before, how you have confidence in your ability to wake up, and that's like the kind of confidence that you need. But don't you also kind of need some base of like general idea of like self-worthiness or some relative sense of confidence to be able to hold yourself as lower than other beings in a way that's not like selfish, almost like in a way that's making yourself feel even worse about yourself, and so then it becomes like going to one extreme of kind of self-centeredness.
Yeah, exactly. Very clear thoughts, both of those. And they're not contradictory.
Yeah.
So you need the confidence. I have Buddha nature, I can awaken. So I can tackle these afflictions over and over. And the Dharma's never intended to make us feel worse, do worse, suffer more. One person used to say, if you sit on your meditation cushion and you suffered the whole time, you didn't do it, you know. It's like That's not what the Buddha wanted. He didn't teach these things so we'd suffer more. So then you're left with, what does that mean? Hold myself as lowest.
Yeah, don't you have to be pretty advanced to be able to
Talk about that.
actually do that?
Advanced. Like how? How would someone, what's that mean? To be able to do that. That what?
To not have it just be kind of like furthering your ignorance and like inflated sense of self.
Yeah. And the self-centered attitude will grab everything, even Dharma.
Mm-hmm.
Even
Yeah,
Dharma.
that's what I'm kind of thinking.
I achieved it.
Yeah.
Especially
Now I'm better. Yeah, I'm special. Now I'm better than others. Ooh, that's like really poison. When you take the Dharma and twist it into more pride, more pride. This is a tough verse. It's that question, what self is being held lowest? Heather, you had something.
The words, I have some confusion with this one too. The words practice and respectfully stood out to me. I would practice seeing myself as lowest of all. And the thought popped into my mind that you have to have confidence that the practice is actually going to like help with stuff. You have to have confidence in the practice and confidence in your teachers to show you how to do the practice. And there's something in there that grabs me with respectfully. Like, how do you hold yourself, how do you respectfully hold others as supreme? How is that different from the alternative?
Disrespectfully.
How do you do that skillfully?
What would be the difficulty?
I don't know. I guess I'm just, am I confused about that? I guess being able to know when, what we were talking about, the other thing of like when you're doing it in a way that inflates ego rather than deflates it.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I struggle like crazy with this verse, but so we're all just doing this together. It's not like there's going to be some answer here, but just processing. If I have respect for myself, with my Buddha nature, respect for the other, I'm going to approach the verse differently. So respect would be equalizing self with other. Pride is, I'm up here. That other kind of pride in being low is down here. So we're always trying to come to an equalizing sameness, humans, suffering, interdependent, as a basis for approaching this.
I guess maybe that's where my confusion comes from, is seeing myself as the lowest of all, but then also respectfully holding others as supreme. So respectfully is equal, but then seeing yourself as the lowest of all. I guess maybe that's where I'm splitting hairs or something.
Yeah. No, you're not. It takes this kind of contemplation. You're not splitting hairs. It takes this kind of contemplation with these. What the verse is trying to do, I think, when I asked what's the purpose, it's taking our usual confusion about a self. That's the grasping at a self. That's the self-grasping ignorance. On top of self-grasping ignorance is self-centered attitude. It rides on just the ignorance that there's an I here, separate. That's the first mistake. Then the self-centered attitude rides on that, and attraction and aversion ride on that. Okay, so that's the picture of how they're going. The verse pulls the bottom one out. The verse is like, pulls the rug out and says, who's this I? I will practice seeing myself.
Like your small self is the lowest of all.
You have to keep asking who that self is, but look at this other translation. It's quite different, and it might clear up some of the questions about practice. Whenever I interact with others, I will view myself as inferior to all. So it's a view. Practice is a view. View is part of practice for sure. And I will train myself to hold others as superior from the depths of my heart. So that's just look at what the Dalai Lama and the Karmapa say about this one. Oh, yeah, we're back to pride. It's about pride. There's the confident kind, which we want to nurture, and the other kind. The Karmapa said, it's really difficult to abandon the affliction of this pride because it's all we know. Mm-hmm. All I know is there really is a self here. Mm-hmm. That's not accurate. It's a delusion. But I know that. I live in it. I've grasped it for endless time. I've practiced really, really well with it. So it's really difficult to abandon that. It's all we know. And when we get at the end of our rope during the day, then we grab that habitual affliction. Sometimes that grasping self-centeredness isn't so extreme, but you get in an argument, it becomes very big. And the way we say it is, I need to be right. I need to win. We may not say it, we feel that. We puff up and start trying to control. Even you're counseling with a client and you're being very, very benign and kind, but you want to steer them a certain way and they aren't going. And you steer a little harder and a little harder. And then, of course, you're skillful. You see, I'm steering way too much. Refrain. But it's what we go to, our habitual affliction. And we need to, the practice is cultivate loving kindness and compassion, because pride keeps us from seeing our own faults and working on it. Mm-hmm. So the Dalai Lama said, never hold yourself as superior to another. Be honest, be transparent, and don't be artificially nice, because that makes you think you're better. I'm nice all the time, and you're not nice. I'm nice and you're not nice. So it's not an easy one to struggle with. What do other people think?
I'm curious if you have run into what I feel like there might be a corollary here. I mean, the pride issue seems like one thing, but then, so what does it mean if I feel I'm better than, or whatever? It would mean that in any given interaction, what I want or think or whatever is more important or has more standing than what you know. So in some ways, I wonder, is this ever talked about as having the implication that we, in putting others higher, we're also putting their interests and their needs and their wishes higher than our own, not just sort of a sense of who's more important, but that importance leads to the sense that, like the outcome of this discussion or interaction, it isn't defined by my getting the biggest piece of cake or winning the argument or whatever. It's to look at it as the importance of what other people want or would be helpful.
Yeah, well said. Tim Campbell, who helps lead the mind training, talks about, very related to that, about he's starting to notice after 2 years of leading this, and leading always makes you study harder and practice hopefully harder than you did before. He said he starts to notice his aggression in every situation. He said even the aggression of just what you're touching on. I come in the room and I have a certain aggression towards it. I want it my way. It can be tiny, like walk in and move the bell just a little. They didn't quite get that right. Move the flowers a little, and then, they came too early, I'm so irritated. And all of that is this, But you told that great story one time related to this. I don't know if you want to share it, where you were talking with someone, and she said something that just popped you out of your way of thinking about the world. Do you remember this? Without saying the names
Oh,
of
that
the
could be,
person.
where, is that when I was maybe talking about how in.
You were being rational. You were
Right,
doing a
and that
rational approach.
If we're gonna solve a difference between us, what I want is for you to convince me that here are the reasons that your way is correct, and I want the logical arguments. So I naturally lay out the logical arguments for others so that they can see why my thing is right. And I had someone tell me, you know what? I don't care about logic. That's not what drives me. That's not what I'm interested in. I want to feel a certain way.
Yeah.
And that's what you should be trying to do.
And see, we come in thinking our logic, or our, let's say the other person functions more on artistic intuition. That's the way the world should be, right? And already there's an aggression there. I like that word aggression. You know, it's the conceit of the self. The conceit that there is a self here who's just a little more right than everyone else. And, you know, maybe I can bring them along. But you find, no, and if you go cross-culturally, that's really where you learn this in a big way. You get in other cultures, and you're just so sure that the common example, looking straight in the eye, is the honest thing to do. And people who don't look in the eye are kind of probably
They're
not so
liars.
honest, or they don't feel good about themselves. And in the other culture, it's like looking in the eye. It's a terrible, aggressive thing to do, and it's disrespectful. And both of them are right in their culture. So, yeah.
I think I'm kind of getting this a little bit.
Good, because I'm not. I'm getting more confused.
I didn't, not a lot, you know, I'm like kind of skirting around the edges of it, but recently, some events occurred at work that, let's just say I didn't get a promotion that I was really hoping for, okay? And I was right, and they were wrong.
Yeah,
and
we agree.
How could they possibly have overlooked someone who was already here in favor of someone who was going to be brought into the company? And a number of things occurred yesterday morning that helped me. Not occurred, but in my mind stream, I had some realizations. Like, I was thinking that I was in this pit of a job, and I was, you know, mucking the blood, you know, and I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm not like one of the refugees that's working, you know, undocumented and has to like run from any, you know, anyone wearing a uniform.
Yeah.
I'm not enslaved in some tomato farm down in Florida or Texas. What the heck?
I love those moments. You know, you're having a conversation with your self-centered mind.
Right, exactly.
Who's saying that, painting a very vivid picture. I'm oppressed, and they don't appreciate, and this is hell.
And those people
Wrong.
No, it's not.
those people who didn't promote me aren't as good as I am.
Yeah.
On some level, there's that's the subtext, right?
Well, sure.
And I realized, well, in talking about this, like, well, maybe they are better than I am. They know what the job is. I'm not even all that familiar with it, right?
Wow, you were giving your self-centeredness hack.
Well, you know what? I was so tired of being resentful and angry.
Good.
And I just said, I'm tired of this anger and resentment. It's just killing me.
Okay.
Okay? And
The
I just
first
realized,
step of freedom is renouncing the suffering. And we're talking about suffering in our own minds.
Right.
We're not
Exactly.
talking somewhere else. So you saw it. I'm sick and tired of the suffering in my own mind. And then you tackled with your self-centeredness and said, no, you're telling me a bunch of lies. You know, let's get on the right situation. Good for you. I love that.
But in discussing this verse today, realized, well, wow, did I do that? And maybe they are superior. And you know what? Everyone I meet is superior in that they have a lesson to teach me that I didn't know before.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
And that, but however, I've got to tell you, there's the aggression of the self. It's about me learning a lesson, right? So I've got, someday, perhaps I'll reach enlightenment where I don't have that. But,
yeah, but we have
I'll take it the relative way for the moment.
Good. We have to start where we are. That thing you just said was one of the most important things that someone said to me again. I told you that my teacher said, can you learn something from somebody?
Right.
And the Dalai Lama has a funny story about this. He says he looks at insects and he thinks two things about them. He thinks how they're superior to him. Number one, they can fly. And he goes, they know how to fly. I don't know how to fly. They're clever about that, and I'm like, don't know how to do that. Number two, in general, they don't harm each other, you know? I mean, maybe one eats one, but they don't have that kind of like, I'm going to war against you and I hate you. And he said humans have that kind of intention and they don't. So he's going, they're kind of superior that way. So even he finds a little insect, he works to find a way, even a little insect is superior to him. Now, what's the purpose of that? Take the pride down. So you just said it very wonderfully. Thank you. We're going to have one more comment on this, and then we need to move on to other verses, or we'll never get through them. Okay, it was Alan. No, Jay.
I was just going to, this is just so rich and so packed with subtlety and ways in which we can step off the edge into, go off the road into the gutter, as you were saying before. I mean, it even sounded like you made a comment before about, you know, when you were talking about different cultures, and it just struck me as like the golden rule, you know, do unto others as you, so treat other people the way you would want to be treated. What if they don't want to be treated that way?
Yeah, even the golden rule can screw us up.
But one of the things that really is difficult about this particular verse is that it raises some, it puts a spotlight on some cultural afflictions that we all share, that we've all heard stories about from, you know, visiting lamas, and stories about, you know, when we think about this, you know, understanding that, you know, pride has two faces, you know, there's self-aggrandizement and there's self-denigration, you know, and that both of them are self-cherishing in a way. And yet we can't lose sight of the fact that one needs to have compassion for ourselves, and that when we struggle with this, we often hear lots of times, you know, on Sundays the Q&A is, you know, is speckled with stories about how people are so rough on themselves. They, you know, they're so self-critical all the time. And so when one looks at a practice like this, where you say to hold yourself as the lowest, you know, even though some of the things that have come out with the discussion about, you know, where really we're going with that is holding, you know, the little illusory self as the lowest, but really recognizing that we all have that same innate Buddha nature and that we're all equal and interconnected. But it's really easy to fall off that trap and say, oh, you know,
I'm dirt.
and to lose the compassion that you have for yourself. On the other end of the scale, in the other gutter, is that as we are holding others above ourselves, as a lot of people were talking about, you know, when you have a discussion, when you have an argument, when you have conflict with other people, and to hold that other person is above you, even though what you're looking at is their ego. You know, and their wishes and their desires that are generated from their little self, there's some kind of more discernment that really needs to be applied.
Absolutely. But the discernment you do with the view. So first you give up winning, then you discern. But as long as we're clinging to the winning, there's no discernment to be had. So this isn't becoming a doormat, Matthew says the sky is red, and I say, oh, Matthew, thank you, the sky is red. That's silly. But because we are constantly habituated to I'm right, I'm here, I'm smarter, or I'm worser, any of those things, I. This flips that. And once we flip, if we can, that's all internal. That's all internal. No one's going to know what you're doing, except probably you'll argue less and they might notice that. But once we give up our self-grasping, then you'll know what to do. The discernment will be simple. Does that make sense? And yes, I'm so glad you pointed out that next step has to occur. We do discern. Because we could follow someone who's creating a lot of suffering in the world.
We're always getting trumped.
Yeah, or yeah. Well, that's one pain and pleasure. But you can see we would end up being silly, stupid, following someone who's, Hitler's right, and he's superior, so I follow him. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to defeat the pride. Then what to do will open, because once you defeat the pride, all this space, we are using up so much energy, so much space, holding that self, building it up, buttressing it, feeding it, protecting it. We have so much energy going there that is tied up. Do you see? It's tied up in an illusion, a delusion. And once we practice, a big part of practice is lessening that delusion, and that energy becomes available to see what to do and to do it. Yeah. Bill.
Just there's one little dimension on pride that we haven't touched on, and at one point I heard pride is one of the most difficult of the kleshas to overcome, and a big piece of it is that pride tells us what problem.
Yeah,
it's it's basically it's perfect. I've got it nailed. So it doesn't even acknowledge. It's sort of at a certain level it really acknowledges I am superior, but at another level it's just of course.
Of course, there's no argument.
Yeah,
and so therefore,
what your own situation is becomes invisible.
Yeah, and there's nothing to work on here. Yeah. It's just you're wrong. You go work. You go work on your bad attitude, because you don't see the world as me, as I do. Okay. That's a big one, and the next one is, I will just say one thing. I'm going to give you, how many questions? 3. But the next one was the one I noticed over and over, that the Dalai Lama, and especially the Karmapa, spent most of his time during the 8 verses on number 3. So who would read that? Yeah.
In all actions, I will examine my mind. And the moment a disturbing attitude arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly confront and avert it.
Okay. Here's some suggested questions. Do you do this? Do you do this? That's a very important question. Do you work to see it, and do you avert it? on and off the cushion? If you don't, why not? How does one perceive an afflictive emotion? So one way you might do this is pick your favorite afflictive emotion, like are you a person who's usually angry, irritated a lot, focus there. If you're a grasper, attacher like I am, focus there. If you're usually foggy, I don't even know what's going on, focus there. And look at it and say, do I see this? And do I see it's a danger? And do I work to avert it? So contemplate. Maybe we'd like to hear from someone who hasn't talked, if you want to. Some of us are big talkers. Not to put you on the spot, but just to give you an opportunity. Oh, Willa. It's Willa, right?
Yes, yes. Sometimes I find myself taking too seriously the Shantideva's instruction to avoid the children, to avoid people who model the difficulties that I already have, with ego and small self, and that can lead to a kind of spiritual snobbishness, I think, or even isolating. It seems like it's a hard balance to put myself in situations where I get to work with these reactions, the aversions and the attractions, where I can still stay present with what's going on in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes me think of your comment about, I want to repeat it for people because it might not have come across, that you find it hard to put yourself in situations where these are even going to rise up. And if you know those kind of situations, you avoid them. Would that be a fair way? Okay. So, it reminds me of the 6 realms. Do people know the 6 realms in classic Buddhist teachings? You've got hungry ghost and hell realm. Those are the hardest ones. Hungry ghost related to extreme craving. Hell realms, extreme anger. Animal realm, pretty extreme ignorance, they're just reacting, run, jump, avoid, eat, don't be eaten. Human realm, great mix. That's why I say best realm to practice the Dharma, because you have this mix of precious human life, but enough suffering that you don't fall asleep. And then what it reminded me of was the God realm. There's a demigod realm which is competing to have all the things God realms do, but God realms have a kind of a opportunity and pleasure to avoid all the difficulty. And the trick of the God realms is it will end. Something will crash in on you, and you want to say, thank you. But God realm people don't do that. They're like, I just want it nice. And we all have that. And I really thank you for your vulnerability and revealing it about yourself. We all have that. Sometimes it's quite skillful to avoid certain situations because you're going to blow. And what good is that? We need to get skillful and learn our capacity. My capacity is thus, and that's it. So I don't put myself in big debates right now about the political situation because I know I'm not going to do well. It's not them. It's that I can't bring anything that doesn't add to the pain and the confusion. When I can, then I do. So we all do that. The seeing of it is really important. Rejoice in that you see that about yourself. And then nudge a little. Pick something, just nudge. Go back to the cushion, look at what happened. That's all we can do. But seeing it is really big, really big. Give a lot of credit for that. Many people live their whole lives avoiding, never see that they're avoiding. It's huge to see it. Other comments about these afflictions? What did you observe about yourself? And yeah, please take breaks as you go, because I think I'm not going to have us do another break. So just go on, Patty.
So I think for me, like sitting on the mat brings the seeing much more clearly. I'm pretty new to this, but I think the thing that when I contemplate this that really hit home was the firmly confront it. I can see and invert it pretty easily, but the firmly confronting it is the part where I think I lose it. Because it's almost like I noticed the disturbing thought or something that will endanger myself or create suffering. I can look at it, I can examine it, and move it aside, but I don't really take the time to confront it with as much significance as it would create suffering. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, makes total sense. And again, look at that wisdom, how you're parsing that, the wisdom seeing, I get this far, and I see I don't firmly confront it. That's really, we need to encourage ourselves about how good we're doing with this. That's really a lot of wisdom there. So one of the ways of looking at that is, here's my affliction coming. I see it, I'm craving. I'm going to grab at it. And I see, I just know from past experience, this will lead to suffering. But it ate me. That's the failure to firmly confront. So it's about, I think of this thing I learned in martial arts. You meet this force with the same degree of force, and then you can influence it. If you meet it too hard, no influence, you wipe them out. If you meet it too loose, then I always say Godzilla and Bambi. Godzilla, Bambi. Mostly we're kind of Bambi around our confronting our afflictions. The affliction is Godzilla, and it's gotten us over and over, so it's quite powerful, quite big. And we go, I think I don't want to do it again. No. We can't, we just, that's what we do. Yeah. So I wish I didn't do that. So we need to, on the cushion, meet it. Practice, meeting it. No. Oh, there's this wonderful text called Creation and Completion, and they give you 3 levels of that no. One level is, I do not want to do this again with vigor. You say that. I see the suffering in it. So you see, you're not just bringing words, you're bringing heart to it. And I see this is not me. I have confidence I can not do it. And then, that you start bringing that energy. Like, you're the enemy. You, affliction, you're the enemy. If there's any enemy, you're actually it. I see you. I see you starting to rise up. You see. And then the second one is to do Tonglen with it. And the third one, you see its emptiness. So it poofs away. So a whole set of thoughts. What are afflictions made up of? A whole set of thoughts and emotions and sensations. What else are they? We can't prove that they're anything else. Man, we give them so much credit. It's like the Wizard of Oz, the big ugly face. Oh my God, Oz! And this is some little guy over there, some little set of thoughts. Totally impermanent, lacking self. And we're like, I must obey. I know, I do it all the time. I obey them. But less than before. Thank you, that was great. One more comment on this and we'll move on.
So it seems as though a significant problem is that we don't even see the afflictions until we're completely overwhelmed by them. A passage from the 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva, which is on this exact same thing, which is not surprising because it all comes.
Yeah.
But when reactive emotions acquire momentum, it's hard to make remedies work. A person in attention wields remedies like weapons, crushing reactive emotions, such as craving as soon as they arise. This is the practice of a bodhisattva. So the point is to be in attention. What this is instructing us is to, so that we can see them when they arise, when they're arising. Otherwise, when you're within the whirlwind,
Yeah. And so it's like a storm. You want to see it way out there. Thunderclouds are slowly gathering. I see it. You want to see it then, not the lightning has struck me and I am passed out. So you know how that works. How do you start seeing it? What do you do so that you can start seeing it? This is something you do a lot of.
to practice mindfulness.
Yeah, on the cushion.
On the cushion and off the cushion.
Yeah, but you have to have
because
the cushion practice.
The anger or whatever more often arises off the cushion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but the on the cushion practice, as you sit there and watch it, when you're supported that way, and you're watching it rise in your mind, playing out like Patty was just saying. You see the fantasy going, but you're on the cushion. The people aren't there pushing all your buttons. You're kind of pretending they are. So you practice there. Oh yeah, there's the anxiety rising up, heat in the stomach, sweaty palms. That's it, all right. Thunder clouds on the horizon. What am I going to do? Easier to do it on the cushion. You do it over and over and over on the cushion. Then in real life, it becomes accessible. Okay?
It's a form of contemplative practice.
Yes.
Where you can actively bring up a situation that you know is going to be challenging in some way, so that you can actually watch in
Yeah.
your own laboratory.
Yeah, where it's nice and safe. You're just in your room. You're not going to slap anybody except maybe yourself. Okay, I want us to try and get through these. So, let me see if there was one thing. Oh yeah, this was cool. The Karmapa said about this, a support for this, seeing the affliction, prepare for the struggle ahead of time. That's what we're talking about. You get on your cushion, play it out ahead of time. The kind you're always stuck in, the argument always with the spouse, or the beating yourself up, whatever it is. Prepare ahead of time. And he said, send spies out to examine your enemy. The enemy being the affliction. You send spies out like, oh yeah, I see how I start getting angry. I see what the deal is. Oh, this is with the early concerns of my good reputation. You know, you contemplate like that. Send some spies out. And then he says, you weaken the enemy, just as we said, by seeing it. But he said, this was cool. He said, play with this on your cushion to not get so serious and stressed about it. So he said, be like a child, you know, where you say, I'm going to fight you. You know, where kids are playing, you know, with little swords or whatever. I'm going to fight you, affliction. And you play with it. You know, see what can happen there. Ha! I'm coming to get you, he said. And the Dalai Lama said, work to see the subtlest beginnings. So you don't be eaten by Godzilla, because you see him way, way off there. You see exactly what he's made up of. A bunch of thoughts. Okay, let's go on to 4. We might get through these. Who would like to read that? Linda?
Whenever I meet a person of bad nature who is overwhelmed by negative energy and intense sufferings, I will hold such a rare one dear, as if I had found a precious treasure.
Now we've talked about this quite a bit already, how that person's a precious treasure, but let's take a couple minutes. And I'd like you to think, have you had an experience that illustrates this in your life? Someone showed up really difficult, and you can see they became a precious treasure through whatever you learned, okay? If you haven't had that happen, I hope you do. And I hope it's really tough. No. And if you haven't had it happen or you can't come up with one, just imagine a time where a difficult person becomes a precious treasure. How could that happen? Stories, thoughts, insights. Linda.
So I was married to a man who had trouble with alcohol. And saw him through the final stages and then couldn't take it anymore. And I left the relationship with a lot of bitterness. But as I found a spiritual path, I've really come around to being able to be thankful for having been in that situation, because I never would have found the Dharma without it.
That is spot on. It's almost like we don't need to say another thing about this verse. And how many of us can think, just raise your hand, of some difficult person that helped you be here? Yeah, over half. So we can take a minute and say thank you to that one. They were a major cause of us being here. More precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel. And I see a number of people very touched by whatever's coming up for you. So that's it. That's the practice. It's the warm-heartedness that appears from these kind of contemplations, the broken, open heart. And part of what our heart opens to is that they suffered a lot, and they may still be suffering, and we have benefited. And their suffering became a great kindness to us. And that's the base of bodhicitta. It's like a wish to repay. I will become a bodhisattva in order to help lead that one out of suffering. Some of us, like I had a quite delightful, amazing, and crazy mother, literally, and same reaction, going back and back and going, wow, I never would have tried to find a way out of suffering, except that I knew I had to. Through her, watching her, saying, I don't want that, not for her, not for me. So, yeah, Cynthia.
Sometimes I think of this as, these situations as incredibly wonderful gift in an incredibly ugly package.
Yeah.
But what happens is, when it happened, and that was an incredible gift. And when it happens again, that was an incredible gift. It trains my mind to consider that looks like an ugly package, but then I have confidence it could be an incredible gift. And so it works that way
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. And just remembering there's nothing in the it that's either one.
Yeah.
The work's inside. That my mind leaves the space for this to be anything. Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the next one. Who will read that?
Which one? Oh, here we go.
Nice and loud.
When others act out of jealousy, mistreat me with abuse, slander, and so on, I will practice accepting defeat and offering the victory to them.
So here's the contemplation. What victory are you giving up here in the context of mind training? What victory? What would you lose? And what would you gain by giving the victory? And what's this victory? What kind of victory? I might want to look at the other verse.
Oh yeah, the
translation too.
I can read that one too if you'd like me to.
Yeah, sure.
Was that 5? Was that 5 or 6?
5.
Okay, that was 5. Okay, cool. When others, out of jealousy, treat me wrongly with abuse and slander, I will train to take upon myself the defeat and offer to others the victory.
So can you imagine a time in which you're in this situation being heavily criticized, even abused? You don't defend, you don't fight. You offer the victory. You might even bow and say you're right. One time, I'll just tell you a story. I don't know where all these, they're all Tibetan spiritual stories, come from many places, I can't remember where. A monk who was very upstanding, like holding all of his ethics so purely. He was accused publicly by a rival monk of having had an affair with this woman, and she had had a baby recently, and that was his child. And he was accused in public. And he bowed and said, "You're right, I'm very sorry, I'll take care of the child." It wasn't his child, and he had not done that. Now, is he just crazy? Or could you imagine something else going on? It's a tough one.
I'm sure I've talked about.
So I will admit I had a very hard time with this one. In fact, the first go around the second go around when we read through them all, and just it was the one that like stuck out to me the most.
Yeah.
As being the hardest for me, because of feeling like the personal application of it, and maybe it's a desire to be right in situations where I feel that I'm personally injured. So what immediately popped up for me are when that like jealousy or that abuse or slander comes out of something like ignorant, like discrimination or racism, and you feel the need to be right in that situation. How do you give that victory to somebody else? Is it just in the refraining, or like it was really hard for me to even contemplate how?
Yeah, I think that's the trick of it. But let's say you feel you can't give the victory. How is it going to go to try to be right? How does that go when you try and correct people in that moment with all your emotion?
It never works.
It never works. Yeah. I've seen the same with gender. Being a white person, it's not racism that comes at me, but sexism can. When I try and correct it with a lot of information about being right or the effect on me, what I've noticed, the other person rolls up the window, we call it. They just roll up their car window while I'm talking. They might look like they're looking at me, but it's the connection's lost. Why is the connection lost? Because we aren't doing it with compassion. Either for ourselves or for others, we're doing it with emotional reaction. And it's really tricky. But one way in that I've seen, again, is that remembering suffering being. You also have to see your own suffering. We kind of get this thing, there's a suffering being racist or sexist or classist. But we're not suffering in that moment because, like Bill was saying, we're right, We don't have a problem. They have the problem. So the pride comes up, the false pride. It doesn't mean, actually what it it doesn't mean to be a doormat. It doesn't mean to agree. It means to do what we can in the moment that moves, that doesn't add to more suffering and confusion. Whenever I see more suffering and confusion, I have to back off and refrain. Then I need to work internally and see what got in my way there. Next time I'll be more effective because I've done the internal work. Does that make sense? It's like a long-range plan, not a short-range plan.
Oh, so you're not going to tell me how right now?
I wouldn't know. You'd have to. You'll know.
I made a big question there. That says how.
You'll know. You'll know. Do the practice, and you are the one who will know. It's that we have to do the practice. And part of that practice is the shine, the calm abiding. We really need to do some calm abiding each day, because otherwise we're never going to feel that, experience that awareness that's there, that really does know what to do. But we've got it so layered up with being right and winning, and they're wrong, and I've got to save them from their racism. I've got to save them from their sexism. Well, that's in the way too, because there's a big I there who's going to do something that may be very confusing to them and not help at all, and maybe even drive them another direction. It's long-range work. It's 3 countless great eons.
You can't really.
Time to go for the game. Bye-bye. Can you share your name again?
I'm Daniel.
Daniel, thanks for coming, Daniel. We hope to see you again.
Bye-bye.
He's off to get his 9-year-old from basketball.
Awesome.
Important thing to do.
He didn't give the victory to others.
Yeah, we can see how that went today. Okay, so we'll have one more and move on.
I was just curious, so this is a question, in judo, it's like you're fighting, and then you just let them have the victory, and so it kind of ends. Is that kind of a piece of that, or am I going the wrong direction?
I think judo, even when you're letting them, even when you're redirecting the force they're sending at you, you're still using it to your advantage. There's still advantage and disadvantage.
Yeah, I can't quite see the metaphor.
I just meant instead of fighting, just refraining and letting it end.
It might be one time, but see, we can't find, we're not going to find a round hole that's going to fit for every incident that's going to work. Like, every time do that, every time do that, every time do that. It's more that you need to bring the view of, and hopefully some practice, of reducing your self-grasping, the one that needs to win, the one that thinks she's right. Reducing that without becoming a doormat. It's tricky. These things were not taught to everyone for these reasons of falling in these ditches. But without becoming a doormat, and out of all that, seeing the skillful thing to do. So in jiu-jitsu, one time might be you want to end the fight, you just flop down and they win. The next time that may not be a very skillful thing to do because of the kind of tournament you're in, because it wouldn't be good for the opponent, because it wouldn't be good for you, good as in compassionate. It might get in there.
Okay, yeah. I got that.
So see, we always want, and I'm glad you brought that up, we always want a formula. Like, could I just do this all the time? If you do, quote, whatever your this is all the time, a whole lot of the time it's going to be pure ignorant. Can I be nice all the time? That could be the worst thing you could do.
I wish it was that easy.
I don't know how to be nice all the time. But, you know, like I shared that story of
pretend
the
to be
boss
nice all the
telling
time.
me, you know, one of the things you're not doing very well with your staff is you want them to like you. You want all of them to like you, and so you're being nice. And that is not good leadership. Good leadership is you know your program, you put it forth, you lead on it. Some people will like you, some people will not like you, and some people won't care. And you have to stop grasping at that. And he was like a Jesus Christian. But I really learned something from him in that. Okay, last thing on this.
I think the long-term perspective, I think, is important. We often want to see the results of what we do. And one of the things, when you were talking about the light switch,
Oh yeah, the grand.
there's a certain way in which all kinds of behaviors could be looked at like that light switch thing. And part of what you contribute when you, in that case, you had a particular approach, in what you contributed in a certain way was not being trapped by the situation.
Yeah.
You contributed that, and so there are ways in which I think that when we take defeat on ourselves in a certain way, we're working with the situation. It's something that we're okay, all right. We're not trapped.
Yeah.
Taking on the defeat doesn't mean taking on being trapped.
Yeah, thank
And
you.
that I think is a really key piece to this. But then what we do, I'm completely baffled myself as to what the skillful things to do are. But just that piece of not feeling like I need to see the results of it. Like, you know, look over my shoulder and see, oh yeah, they got it right now.
Yeah.
They changed their registration.
Right, or you stop doing the light switch. Be ready. But in that bafflement is the liberation. Because we have stepped out of our I, big fat I, know what to do. And I have my hammer right here, and I always hammer when I see this. How's that working for you? You know? So, as they say. So in the bafflement, we've made a step forward, and we see it. I am so unsure. Start logging. log. But a smart log, right? Log means the body goes like a log. But the mind is working. And Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche says this thing that I've always really liked. This is workable. You're sitting there in the total confusion, and you can say to yourself, this is workable, and you're not trapped. That has a hint of something different. I might do something different here. Okay? Okay, we're going to go forward, and I think we're going to skip number 6 because we've pretty much done that one, how the enemy is the supreme teacher. We've pretty much gone over that. You know, they show up looking like a difficult person, like an enemy, but they're the teacher, right? If we have more time, we'd really go after it some more. Let's go to number 7 and have someone read that. Maybe someone who has not read. Would someone who hasn't read like to read? Maybe a lot of people have. Oh, okay, Willa.
In short, I will offer directly and indirectly every benefit and happiness to all beings, my mothers. I will practice in secret taking upon myself all their harmful actions and suffering.
Okay, this is Tonglen. Who doesn't know what Tonglen is? It's good if you don't know, raise your hand. It's the giving and taking meditation. So I want to do one today, just about 5 minutes of it, focusing on our mothers of this life, not just imagining everyone's been our mothers. Sometimes the mothers of this life can be the most difficult to do this with. For others, it's quite easy. But just take a good posture and picture your mother of this life right in front of you, whether she's alive or dead or whatever the situation is. And see her as clearly as you can at some certain age. It doesn't matter what age, whatever came to your mind. See her face. Now, look very closely, as closely as you can, at your mother's suffering. The things that were difficult for her in her life, maybe still are. Really look at them. Let them be transparent to you. Physical suffering, mental suffering, emotional suffering. Now, turn your attention to your mother's great kindness toward you. She was pregnant with you, very uncomfortable physically. She took at least good enough care of herself so that you lived. She went through a terrifying, difficult birth process in which many mothers and babies die, even in good hospitals. And she did that so you could be born. Then you were born, and she was amazed. And she took care of you, whether she wanted to or not. Sometimes mothers don't really want another child, but most often they do. But regardless, she took care of you, and it was hard work. Waking up when you cried at night, changing hundreds of your diapers, feeding you, finding money so you would have clothing, shelter, food. And then she made sure you went to school, daycare, kindergarten, whatever it was. All that time she was not doing what she wanted. She was doing what you needed. Parents give up so much sleep, so much energy, so much time. They constantly make themselves do things they don't really feel like in order to take care of their children. This is how your mother was with you. So you look at these two things, her suffering and her great kindness, and see what rises in you. And simply wish her free of all that suffering. Thank her for the great kindness. Breathe in the suffering on your in-breath. See it destroying your self-centeredness. On your out-breaths, breathe out to her everything good. Give her your Dharma. Give her your merit in the Dharma. Give her your teachers. Give her any peace of mind that you have, Give her all your material wealth. And just do this for a couple minutes, breathing in her suffering, relieving her of it, and giving her anything and everything you can think of that will bring her happiness. If your mother's dead, wish her to be in wonderful realms where she has access to the Dharma, to the Buddha, where she can find the Bodhisattva path and have all the support to practice it. And then just drop the whole story and rest for a moment in the space. So your mother gave you the Dharma because she gave you this body. It's not an easy thing to give someone a body. I have one son, biological. It was really hard. And I'm really glad I did it, because he's a good man. So this is the way we need to think when we think of these verses, regard everyone as our mother. If we don't even regard our birth mother with this kind of respect and care, we won't, that thing will just mean something, kind of abstract. And the teaching is that everyone has been our mother and everyone has done those things for us at great sacrifice to themselves. So the least we can do is wish them well, wish them free of suffering. Okay, we have no more minutes, but can I go 4 more minutes over? Good. And if you need to go, promptly, that's fine. The 8th verse, let's just read it, and I'll look what the Karmapa says. Okay, who would like to read the 8th verse? Bob.
Without perceiving these practices being defiled with the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, I will practice without grasping to release all beings from the bondage of disturbing unsubdued mind and karma.
Thank you. So we won't meditate on this, I'll just talk about it. What was my question? Hey, where'd my question go? I must have had a question about this one. But I just want to share what the Dalai Lama said. I will give you my question now, so that if I can find it. Oh, what are the 8 worldly concerns? You have your cliff notes right there, your cheat sheets. What does it mean to understand all phenomena as like illusions? I find it quite helpful in the 7-point mind training, regard everything as a dream. Sometimes when things are almost the worst, like I'm really craving, or I'm really angry, just if I can think of that for a nanosecond, or I'm with my grandkids and they're doing everything, push every button all at once. Regard it as a dream. Now in a dream it's kind of interesting. It suddenly becomes sort of interesting. oh, there's these little munchkins in my dream, and they're hopping all over, and I'm like this, and the milk is on the floor like that. Quite interesting. Because in a dream, yeah, it doesn't matter, right? You're going to wake up. Well, that's just how it really is. You know, you're going to wake up, and it ain't all you're making out of it. So that's quite helpful. The Dalai Lama said about this, the first thing, these 8 concerns, and you look at them again on the sheet, your gain, your loss, your reputation, good and bad, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. These 8 concerns can taint our practice. So, number 1, they keep you from practicing at all, because you're just caught up in them. You, me, all of us. But number 2, you can start applying them to Dharma. Like I said, you know, I'm a famous Dharma teacher now. And so, you know, you're right, you're just poisoning the Dharma. You can poison the Dharma with them, you know, or wonder how much dana I'll get, you know, the gain and loss thing. Or, you know, wonder if they'll go out and talk with me, you know. It's good to make fun of your self-centeredness, like put it out and make fun of it. Okay. When it's this verse says be released from bondage, it's the bondage of seeing, and he goes through well, I won't describe them, but there's these 4 marks of Buddhism. Seeing the impure as pure. See, we see the impure as pure, like, ooh, that person I'm in love, and they'll save me from everything. So, but there's just an impure person there with all their struggle. And I'm putting this purity on. So seeing the impure as pure, seeing the impermanent as permanent, that's easy. This will fix it. This will be the fix. So we see it as permanent, but it's all shifting. Seeing suffering as happiness. We do this all the time. My happiness is in the freezer right now. It's this really great ice cream. It's made with, it's non-dairy. I gotta tell you about this. It's made with, what are those kind of nuts called that you can make a creamy thing out of?
Hazel?
Huh?
Hazelnut?
Cashews.
Oh, okay.
It's cashew nut milk. Then they made dairy-free caramel in it. And it's really caramely. And then they made dairy-free chocolate chips in it. And then they salted it. It's salted, dairy-free caramel cashew ice cream. I've been eating quite a bit. But I am happier. Maybe it is in there. Anyway, okay, enough of that. So I saw happiness in there. But I have to, you know, spend my money on it, go get a bellyache. There's some suffering in it. And the 4th is seeing the no self as having a self. These are the sufferings that we do, the confusion. This is the bondage that we're in. We see impure as pure. We see impermanent as permanent. We see suffering as happiness. And we see things as having a self that really have no self. Okay? That's what sticks us. The Dalai Lama says, engage with the world, see it as illusory. We engage. It can be fun. And even the pain can be fun because that's the lesson. But the whole time it's gone by, there's not one thing from this moment past that you can find again. Poof, your whole past's gone. So, illusory. The future hasn't happened, illusory. Even this moment, we can't find a moment, remember? We tried to find time in a moment. Understand everything as dependently arisen, which is the Gelug's term for totally interdependent. I arise here, sharing this because you arose here. I arise because the teacher, these thoughts arise because of gazillion things. We arise from our mothers and fathers. So when we work with this interdependent, that can be a step toward experiencing the emptiness, experiencing it. Then, when we truly experience it, we've hit the path of seeing on the Bodhisattva grounds. And from that path forward, you never believe in the illusion again. You might have some afflictions rise, because there's two more paths you have to work on, but you won't believe it anymore. Won't that be cool? You just see it, and you can play with it. You can go, I know there's no I know there's no solid I, but I know on a relative level it's important how I act in this dream. That's what Ken MacLeod said one time. Someone challenged him, regard everything as a dream. He said, but it's a very important dream. What you do in the dream is very, very important. So you're stepping out of the nihilism. So that can lead to experiencing emptiness, which is what we want to do. We don't want to just talk about it, but we want to experience it. I won't go into that part, that's too. Okay, I want to end with reading one thing from a book we do have right there in the bookshelf called The Great Awakening. I think it's a little paperback by Colleen Pichet, translated by Ken MacLeod. I'm just not positive I wrote the title down, The Great Awakening or Path to Great Awakening. It's right there. I'll meet you there if you want to see it. And there's a prayer in the back. And when Ken taught us this at a retreat long ago, I memorized this, just 2 paragraphs. It's really cool to memorize short things. You can then call them up. So in the morning, I sometimes, before I get out of bed, I say this because I've memorized it. When the confusion of the 8 worldly concerns has been thrown over, attachment to self-grasping completely severed, and genuine concern for others thoroughly developed. 3 pretty hard steps. I'm going to read them again. When the confusion of the 8 concerns has been thrown over, attachment to self-grasping completely severed, that is cut, and genuine concern, not pretend concern, for others thoroughly developed, then whatever appears can be seen as an aid on the path of awakening. So no matter what shows up, enemy, friend, neutral, stupidity, sleepiness, anger, it all appears as an aid on the path of awakening. Then we make a wish, grant your blessing that mind training be complete. This is a prayer to the teacher. Then the last one, with the direct understanding that what is ultimate has no origin, no cessation, no duration, is emptiness. Yet what appears arises from causes and coincidence like an enchantment. May I come to know all that is and work naturally for the welfare of all beings as long as samsara exists. Isn't that gorgeous? That's gorgeous. Okay, we have to dedicate and go. Where did it go? I keep losing the prayer. I don't know. I've got tiny papers here. Thank you. Okay. So let's take a moment to just rejoice so much that we spent our time this way. This has created huge merit because of your intention, your motivation, your attention, your wishes for these things to happen. And this is what can ripple out and will ripple out and is rippling out to end the suffering of self and others. May all beings
possess happiness. May all the lower states of existence be forever emptied. May the prayers of all the bodhisattvas abiding on the various stages be accomplished. For as long as space endures, and for as long as living beings remain, so then may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. By this merit may I attain omniscience. May the enemy wrong action be overcome. From this ocean of existence, the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, may all beings be freed.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. Please come back tomorrow. You can come tomorrow at night.